Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. China has devalued its currency, known as the Yuan, for a third consecutive day as of August 13th. Its depreciation against the dollar will increase the supply of yuan in foreign exchange markets and lower the cost of buying Chinese exports for other countries. The business press in the US and Europe is saying investors are worried that this is a signal of a stalling Chinese economy and an attempt to raise the yuan as a global reserve currency, which is currently the fifth most internationally used currency. US is also worried that this will have a ripple effect in slowing down the US economy that is currently experiencing some growth. Joining us now to clarify what is happening is Zhun Xu. He has been teaching political economy at Renmin University in Beijing since 2012 and is now joining the Department of Economics at Howard University. Zhun, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Shalini.
So let's begin by how the devaluing of the yuan will be experienced in the Chinese market itself.
Well, in general, I mean, markets hate uncertainty and surprise, especially when it involves a big and influential economy like China. And if we put in a historical context, the Chinese currency or yuan or RMB has been mostly appreciating against the US dollars during the last 10 years by about 30%. Even during Asian economic crisis in 1997 or the recent crisis in 2008, the Chinese government did not really depreciate its currency. So when it depreciated the currency the other day by 2%, that's very unprecedented, given that the whole economy is slowing down and export is decreasing very rapidly recently, and we had a stock market crash not very long ago. Everything makes people worry about the future of the Chinese economy.
Zhun, what is prompting the central bank to devalue the currency right now at this time?
Well, the direct reason, according to the Central Bank of China, PBOC, that they changed the rule of making the so-called mid-market price. Every day, the PBOC would give a suggested price of the Chinese currency, its exchange rate. And the daily fluctuation of the actual market price would not exceed 2% of that given price.
Now,
right, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want you to finish your thought.
Right. So the PBOC said it recently changed the rule so that it incorporates more of market information in making this mid-market price. So given that during the last several months, the actual market price is always lower than the official mid-market price. So once it removes this kind of regulation, the mid-market price starts depreciating. So does the actual closing market price.
And why is this such a concern to other countries and the U.S. in particular? This is really going to mean that Chinese goods are even cheaper than they already are.
It may be beneficial to some customers, some firms in China and also in the US, but not necessarily to most of us. Many goods, commodities are already on a contract price, which is not going to be hugely affected by this small depreciation. Plus, the scale, the magnitude of this Chinese currency depreciation is not very large compared to international standards. It's just so during the last 3 days it depreciates about 4 or 5%. It's not a very huge amount, really. It's just a very surprising compared to the Chinese context.
And why are the currency speculators worried about this and pitching this in terms of a currency war between the U.S. dollar and the yuan?
There have been many people talking about possible currency war, not only between Chinese currency or the U.S. dollars, but also among developing countries in general. I think that's it's very unlikely that China will step into a real currency war among other countries. To explain this, we have to go back to what are the the factors associated with this sudden exchange rate change. So that's one possibility, that the Chinese government wants to encourage its export sector by making the commodities cheaper, right? Depreciate the currency. But the point is, the old model, the old export-oriented model, is already been proven that it's environmentally and economically unsustainable. So China is not going to simply go back to that old model. Also, the global demand is not very strong right now, and Chinese government and Chinese central bank has been repeatedly saying that they have no interest in going into currency wars with other countries. It's not going to do any good to China itself. And plus, even China wants to go back to the same model, or the old model, the cheap commodity model. It's very likely that they cannot do this, because during the last 10 years, the cost of labor, the wages, average wages, have been increasing more than 10% per year. If that trend continues, with the increasing cost of resources, and China, that the model of producing and exporting extremely cheap material and goods is not going to be able to be achieved in the medium term. So I think it's possible, but the possibility is very low to see a currency war between China and other countries.
Now, Zhun, people speculate that of course, the Chinese economy has been slowing down, and this is a way for the central bank to try to stimulate the economy by devaluing the yuan. Is that true? And if so, what impact does this have on the local economy and workers in particular?
Yes. I think there is definitely an element of the consideration that the central bank wants to boost the Chinese economy by depreciating the currency, but not so much via exports. I think the current plan of the government is to, bring the Chinese currency, the yuan, as one of the global currency. Join the Special Drawing Rights Group (SDR) of the IMF. They expect this would, bring new capital inflow, or encourage, capital investment in other parts of the world by the Chinese firms, and bring many other benefits, not only economically but also diplomatically. This so-called depreciation, or the more market-determined exchange rate formation, is one of the conditions for joining SDR. So I think that's partly a response to the IMF's request on Chinese currency reform. But I think the actual impact of that, even with the Chinese currency joining the SDR, the actual impact will be very limited on the Chinese economy, because by joining SDR, that's equivalent.
Just describe what the SDR is for our viewers.
It's another way of saying it's a global reserve currency. It's like the U.S. dollars, euro, the pound, and also the yen. Right? The commonly accepted special currency by other governments. But in order to achieve this status, China needs to open up its capital account by so-called liberalizing the capital control, deregulating the capital market. That's the prerequisite of joining this elite group of currencies.
And the idea is that the state will also make some money in terms of the exchange rates and so on.
That's right.
If
also,
the yuan is used more in terms of global capital exchanges.
Yes. Also, politically, it's always a very good thing to say that, oh, I make the Chinese currency one of the global currencies. It sounds very good. But the fact is, once you make that, you actually the so-called liberalizing capital account also put China, under more risk and more fluctuation than before, because you have much less capital control than before. And basically the one of the experiences, one of the lessons of the Chinese growth story during the last 3 decades is that China always maintained a very strong capital control, right? So China didn't really have a big financial crisis. So by doing this, Chinese government also loses the capacity of implementing any alternative policies other than neoliberalism, because now with less capital control, it's very hard to do anything different than from other countries. So I think it eventually will not be beneficial for the Chinese workers or the Chinese people or Chinese economy in general.
Zhun Xu, I thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.